I think the most important thing for me to start off with is that nobody would have ever thought that I was going to end up in prison, let alone have a life sentence in prison. I was born in the small coastal town, Los Osos, California, over by San Luis Obispo. And my parents moved down to Lancaster, California when I was really young, maybe 2 years old. I grew up pretty rural for my first 10, 11 years. And that's probably the fondest memories that I have of my life. My dad was a manager for the local dump site with waste management. My mom was a old school massage therapist whose big claim to fame was that she had massaged Jack LaLanne one time, and she had a plaque of him on her wall in her office, and I'll never forget it. And my parents, they didn't really get along that much. My earliest memories of them is pretty toxic and chaotic. They fought a lot, and by the time I was, maybe about 5 years old, they had already separated and were heading into divorce. My mom left my dad with the old house in this area called Antelope Acres. It's about 10 minutes outside of the town of Lancaster, and it's all dirt roads. It's foreclosed agriculture when the water and the land became too much for the farm owners to own, and so they had sold it back to the government for development, but the government never developed anything, and so it was really rural in this way. A lot of people with horses, a lot of tractors, getting stuck behind them while we're heading into town, things like that. My dad was a writer at heart, and he was an artist, and he really instilled, I think, that in me and in my siblings. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. I'm in the middle. I'm 41 years old now, and it's been a long journey. Life in the desert was like an adventure. My brothers and I, we used to go and explore for miles and miles out front. And when you looked out from the front of our house, this little 2-bedroom house, probably 900 square feet, with 5 people living in it. My dad took on the primary role as the parent, and my mom was pretty kind of like fast and loose out and about. And so we spent the majority of our time with him. And with him being an artist at heart and a writer, imagination and curiosity was a big staple in our home. So he took us out into the desert and he created all these characters, Flatfoot Jack and Cactus Annie, and we would find like cans and stuff like that, and he'd be like, oh, look, it's Flatfoot Jack's, and we would think it's a campsite from his. And he was this old hobo that rode the rails and would just kind of like wander from place to place. And I think that really was a huge imprint on me because I became very curious about getting out into life and exploring everything that was around me. I was about 10 years old when my dad remarried, and I feel like that was probably the catalyst of the explosion within our family. And I don't think my mom was able to really handle it. I feel like it broke her mentally in a lot of different ways, because after that, her behavior became really erratic and abusive, verbally abusive, sometimes physically abusive. We loved our stepmom, and we still call her mom today, but there was just so much in the family that happened because of it. When my dad remarried, I remember going back to my mom's house like maybe a week later, and all of a sudden she had a guy there, a guy named Peter Lawrence, actually, from Denmark. And we had never met him before or anything, and she let us know that that was our new stepdad, and they had married, and that he was going to be living with us. And my brothers and I, we didn't really care for him right away. He seemed a little strange, and rightfully so, because it wasn't too much longer after that he started to kind of walk around the house naked. He started to try to go into my little sister's room at night. And so my older brother and I, we would take like sticks and bats and go sleep in my sister's room, afraid that she was going to be hurt in some type of way and that we wanted to protect her. And my mom, we would raise our concerns to her, and the fact that we didn't like him, and she just seemed to be indifferent towards it. That was just what it was going to be. So I was the type that was very outspoken. If I felt like somebody was creepy, I was going to fucking call you on it. And that's what I started to do to him. So me and him, we got into a lot of kind of arguments, added to the chaos, things like that. And it all came to a head when one day my older brother picked up the phone, and it was a collect call from jail from Peter Lawrence, who had been arrested for indecent exposure in public restrooms. And so he kind of started to come out that he had this history of sexual abuse. Now, I don't know if he ever touched my sister or my little brother. He never did me or my older brother, but the fact that happened was enough, obviously, for my dad to say, no fucking way, right? Is this guy gonna be around my kids? And that was the beginning of the custody battle between my parents. And the custody battle was really ugly. My mom was, obviously, she didn't want to let us go in any type of way. And my dad felt our safety was absolutely being jeopardized. And so there was no compromise. It was either going to be that we were at my dad's house, or he was going to go down fighting to make it be that way. Sports, they completely went away once the custody battle started. I would go to like soccer games or to hockey games and stuff. I played a wide variety of sports, and it was just unbearable and embarrassing to have my parents fighting with each other on the sidelines. I couldn't go to, if it was my dad's time of visitation and I went over to my mom's side to say hello to her, I felt like I was letting him down in some type of way. And if it was my mom's visitational time and we were at a game and I would go see my dad and my stepmom, then I felt like I was making her angry and I was disappointing her in some type of way. And so it was really confusing for me as a kid. And it made me really build up a lot of resentment and anger towards my parents because of it. So I decided that I was going to be done with sports, and I fell into skateboarding. And skateboarding was special because it didn't need any parents. I didn't need any equipment. Just my board and cement, and that was good. And once I started to get around the culture of skateboarding, I felt like it was a safe place for me to be angry and to be anti-authority in a lot of different ways. A lot of the skaters that I was around that were from my hometown, Lancaster, they were all like me, man. A lot of them came from broken homes. A lot of them were skateboarding to escape things. They were smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, getting into fights. And it was kind of like a perfect place, I feel like, for an angry and resentful kid to find. As time went by, I started to get more and more into trouble. I became less involved in school. School was more of a social activity for me than it was about education or learning. I started to ditch school, getting into fights, getting kicked out, going to continuations. And by the time I was 15 years old, 14 turning 15 years old, I had pretty much lost all interest in it. My mom eventually lost all custodial rights to my brothers and sister and I. She had no visitational rights. She couldn't be around us, and she was court-ordered away. And if she was caught around us, then they threatened that they would take her to jail. And it's this weird thing of loving her so much and at the same time being so angry towards her. It's this weird thing to love somebody and know that they're not good for you, and it was a lot for me to handle at that time. And I decided that I was completely done with all the adults. I was done with my dad. I was done with my stepmom. I was done with the courts and family courts and child psychologists and getting on the stand to talk about these things with judges about her and all of that. I was over it and I was sick, and I decided that I was going to run away from home, and I was going to go, take control of my life. So I did. About 15 years old, I took off from home. And At first, I was just like a little vagabond around my hometown. I just skateboarded all around. I slept in abandoned cars, abandoned houses. And I remember pulling up to these apartment complexes in Lancaster off of K4 and 32nd Street. Some low-income apartments, the type that has the light bulb shot out on it, so that way it stays dark and the fellas can kind of like do their dirt without being seen. And there was an abandoned car in front. And as I was skateboarding by, I remember smelling weed in the air, and I saw this group of kids that looked like they were about my age standing out front in the parking area. And I go skateboarding up to them, and I'm like, hey, yo, what's up? Where's the weed at? You know, and so they're like, what? Who's this dude? And I get into it with another kid, and we get into a fist fight with each other. And when we get into this fist fight with each other, I got the better of them, which, you know, got the attention of the crowd and got the attention of the guys that were right there. And at that point, I was one of them. So I started sleeping in this abandoned car in front of the apartment complex, and I was in there every day hanging out, tough. And I met this kid named Brandon who stayed in the houses around the corner, but he would always like walk his dog. He had a pit bull, and he would walk his pit bull into the apartment complex, and he knew everybody, black kid, right? And I started to hang out with him all the time. And his older brother had got out of prison, who was probably about 26, 27 at the time. Brandon and I were both about 15 years old. And Brandon's family had moved from South Central LA out to Lancaster to try to get away from the gangs and the crime and the drugs and all of that. And so they thought like the suburbs of Lancaster is where it's at. So they had moved their family out there. And I remember his dad was a pastor and was the pastor of a small church. I think it was called like West Athens or something like that off of 123rd and Vermont in South Central LA, borderline of Gardena and South Central. So this pastor had moved his kids out there, and Brandon's older brother had gone to prison, got out of prison, and I'm hanging out with Brandon one day in the apartment complex, and I was like emulating being a gang member at the time, and I was picking up a lot of it from the guys that were at that apartment complex. And so I had this blue bandana in my back pocket, and when Brandon's brother comes pulling up in the car, he goes walking by me and he sees my blue bandana. And as a way of just like kind of like making fun of me in a sense, you know, he was like, white boy, like, what are you doing with that bandana in your pocket? And I was like, I'm a Crip. And he was like, what? You're a what? Where are you from? And so we had our own little name inside of this apartment complex, right? We were called Pack Mob, pimpin' ass criminals. And so anyways, we were just like a little wannabe clique. But little did I know that Brandon's older brother was a real Crip from a real gang, from a gang that's one of the original in South Central LA. And I think what he saw in me was somebody that he could groom, you know, in a lot of different ways. I think he saw somebody that was really hungry for acceptance, and acceptance into this lifestyle that I was like idealizing in a lot of different ways. Because he started to ask me to like roll with him and, you know, get in his car and we would drive around, and, you know, he would ask me about myself, and like I started to feel like this was my older homie right here. And I looked up to him. And I remember one day we were sitting in this blue Jeep Cherokee that he had, and he asked me, he goes, yo, man, what do you want to do? Do you want to sell drugs? Do you want to rob? You know, you got to do something. How are you going to make money out here on your own? And I had tried selling drugs before this, and it didn't end well, where the guys that I was selling some drugs to had pretty much taken the dope from me and wouldn't pay me. And so the guy that I was selling drugs for popped up for me to give him his issue of the money of the drugs that I was selling, to give him an issue of the money for the drugs that I was selling for him. And he, when I didn't have it, he looked at me and he was like, okay, cool. And he drove off. And probably about a week later, he had two guys beat me up, you know, really bad. They had jumped on me and beat me unconscious, and and really worked me over. So for me, I was like, I don't really ever want to go back to selling drugs. And Brandon's older brother was like, well, I hit licks, and would you like to try that? So anyways, he pulls out a gun, and he puts the gun in my lap, and he's like, you want to hold it? So I hold the gun, and I look at it, and I remember it made me feel really powerful. It made me feel like I was, like I didn't have to be scared, and it made me feel like I was one step further in being like real in this lifestyle, you know, and not just a wannabe who's sleeping in this abandoned car pretending to be a gang member. So anyways, he's like, look, I'm going to drive around. I'm going to drop off some dope and stuff like that. You hold the gun. If the cops get behind us, I'll pull over, jump out. You run off with it. I'll skirt off this way, right? And we'll get away, you know? And I'm like, all right, that sounds like it makes sense. So anyways, we start driving around, and I'm holding the gun, and that kind of becomes my job with him. I start holding the gun all the time. And one day he introduces me to this other guy, and he's like, hey man, this is a guy that's a part of my crew, and we're gonna go and we're gonna rob this building. And I want you and you to go in, I'll drive the getaway car, and when you guys come running out, you'll throw the money into and the mask and the gun into my car. You guys jump into this stolen car, we'll drive off and we'll meet up over here. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is getting real. And so I agreed. And I remember it was a Ralph's off of 123rd in Vermont, right? Because by this point, he had taken me down to LA, down to South Central, had introduced me to the gang that he was from. And I was like on my way to gaining acceptance from these guys in this new area now. Kind of jumping around a little bit. Just to go back and talk about how I went down to LA, after riding around with Brandon's older brother for quite a bit, he asked me one day if I wanted to go down to LA and be a real Crip, and if I wanted to see the gang that he was from. And this is why I talk about curiosity, imagination, and how these things were really imprinted on me, because when he told me that, I felt really excited. I felt like I was getting out of this little hometown that I was from. I felt like I was going to be going into a world where I could completely reinvent myself, and that I could forget about this life that I didn't care for, of having these parents that I was mad at, of having, you know, a mom who, you know, introduces people like Peter Lawrence into my life. And so I was like happy to go down to LA, and I was excited about it. And so he takes me down to South Central. It's on the borderline of Gardena and West LA, and or South LA, I mean. And there's a park there called Helen Keller Park, and it's like the hub of the gang. And the gang's name was Raymond Avenue Crip. And it's a very old neighborhood inside of like Crip history. And so you have three factions: Pasadena, Tin Deuce, which is Ingle Watts, and then you have the 120s, which are the originals, and that's the spot at Helen Keller Park. So I get out of the car, and it's what's called a hood day, which is everybody from all the different factions are all at this park, right? Showing kind of like the strength of the gang. And I get out and I see hundreds of Crips, and they're all like barbecuing, and they're all partying with each other. And I was like, man, this is fucking like, it just was so exciting, and it felt electric, and it felt so foreign compared to what I come from, you know, that it made me want to just like immerse myself in it. And so Brandon's older brother starts introducing me to everybody, and later that night I get put on the gang. Two guys, they jump over this fence, I jump over the fence, we start getting busy, and they jump me in, and afterwards there's this big celebration, and I felt really special by being this white kid from Lancaster and gaining acceptance from, you know, these real gangsters down in the city. So going back to this Ralph's, well, the Ralph's is a grocery store in the middle of the neighborhood. And it's almost like a rite of passage for guys from the neighborhood to rob this Ralph's, which is so strange that now I look at it as a 41-year-old father who just, man, my whole message is about helping out and not hurting things. And, you know, I just carry a deep level of embarrassment and shame over having ever been a part of something like that or have tried to rob somebody or any of those types of things. So anyways, so Pina introduces me to this guy that's Brandon's older brother. And it's my initiation. And he's asking me, am I ready to go rob this Ralph's right here? And I say, yeah, I'm ready to go do it. So me and the other guy, we go inside of the grocery store. And when we walk in, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. There's people shopping in there. It's a Ralph's. And the guy that I'm with, he pulls out this gun and he holds it up, right? And he tells everybody, yells it out, everybody get the fuck down. And everybody looks up in shock. And so I pull out a gun. Get the fuck down. You know, I yell out with everything else. And people get down and we start running up to the cash registers. Open the fucking cash register. So they open up the cash register. We start grabbing this money out of the cash register. We're stuffing it into this bag. And then we panic and we run out and we jump into this car. We drive off around the corner. We get away. And we go to this laundry room and we sit in the laundry room and a couple other guys from the gang show up and we pull this money out and we start counting out the cash and splitting it. And we probably got, I don't know, maybe $500, you know, in small bills because it's just it's a Ralph's and it's a cash register and shit like that. And my heart is pounding and everybody's like clapping me on the back for being down enough to go in and do it. And I feel like, wow, man, like I fucking stepped up, you know? So anyways, I start hanging out in the neighborhood every day and I'm just being around everybody. And my whole thing is how can I gain respect? How can I be looked at and not, you know, kind of, I don't even know how to say it, but how can I just be looked at as a real one in this way?
But was being white?
Yeah, as being white. Yeah, because being white from there and also being from Lancaster, you know, I wasn't even from that neighborhood. So I carried this kind of like chip on my shoulder of always wanting to prove myself in some type of way. And that's kind of like what my whole purpose was for the next, I don't know, maybe year and a half leading up to my arrest and going to prison. So I'm back and forth between Lancaster. I'm still completely on my own. I see my mom every now and again. I crash at her house every now and again. My dad is putting up flyers all around town with like my picture on it saying, have you seen this kid? And all these different things. And I'm just like, if I see his truck, I'm running and I'm like hopping fences and stuff because I don't want him to catch me and I don't want to go back home. I want to continue doing what I'm doing.
Are you going to school?
I wasn't going to school, and then they passed this bill where a runaway can enroll themselves into high school without their parents' consent. And for some reason, I had this urge to just do it again, and so I decided to enroll myself, and I started going to Lancaster High School for maybe like 3 months or something in that period. And then I got kicked back out for a fight after school with another kid from the high school. So they sent me off to a continuation. And I was going off and on, but I would dip out into the streets for like a month, you know, and not go to school or anything. And all of the staff and the teachers, unbeknownst to me, but they were all like, they would have meetings and be debriefed about me because I was a high-risk kid, you know, at that school. And they knew that I was homeless. They knew that I was a runaway. So a lot of them were like talking about kind of like what to do with me. For me, I would go to school, I would be in class. All of a sudden, if I didn't feel like being there anymore, I'd get up and I would walk right out the class, right off the campus. And then I would just be back into the streets again for about another month and a half, whatever, you know? And none of my friends went to school that I had at that time. All the gang members, they were in the streets in the neighborhood. They were going to school. Their moms were, prostitutes and drug addicts, and their dads were in prison. And so, we all lived kind of, on our own in that way. So my friends, they didn't even go there. But what's crazy is that they sent me to this continuation, and I was trying to go to it. And I remember I went to school on Friday, and then that Sunday I was with Brandon's older brother, and I was with another 2 guys from my neighborhood from Raymond that were out in Lancaster. And we were talking about robbing this bingo hall. And it was a building called United Desert Charities. And so they were supposed to have like $20,000 to $30,000 in there. They were going to be preparing for their bingo that night. That day is when they like count the cash and stuff like that. And we had somebody that had like worked in there before that had run this all down to us. And so this was going to be our next like big lick. And for me, in my mind, I was like, man, I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy a quarter pound of weed. I'm going to go buy a bunch of clothes from the swap meet. And then I'm going to blow out of town in a car, and I'm going to go figure out what's next. That was like my whole goal with this next robbery that I was going to do. So Sunday morning, I almost sleep past it. And then I get a call, and it's from the older homeboy from the hood. And he's like, hey, yo, man, you ready to go do this? And so I go, yeah, I am. So I wake up, brush my teeth. I walk about 5 houses down to where his house was at. We get into the car, and we start gearing up. Gloves, beanie. We didn't have any masks. There were no cameras on the inside, so we feel like we didn't need them. And it was such a big building that we didn't want the people to see us come in with the masks and like have time to react. So we didn't wear any masks. So we get dropped off in front of the building, me and the other guy, and my job is to hold the gun. And when we walk in, there was this older guy right there named Patrick Lawrence. And, I found out he was like an old veteran during trial and stuff, And, man, it's just crazy that I'm in there trying to rob these people, these old people at a bingo hall. The level of like fucking this need for acceptance that's just like driving me into this, man, is crazy. So anyways, I walk into the building, I pull out the gun, Patrick Lawrence is right there, and the first thing he does is he reaches out and he grabs the barrel of the gun. Boom. And I'm like, whoa. And my crime partner goes behind him, and he doesn't have a gun, but he's got his finger like one, and he jams it into Patrick's back, and he says, don't be fucking stupid. Let the gun go. And Patrick lets it go. And when he lets it go, I look out into the building, and it's this huge hall, and I see 2 women right here, younger, probably 30s, Carrie Gunderson, Melissa Mendez. There was an older woman, Nora Kirkbride, and there was a guy named Andrew Arcienega who was like a janitor in the bathroom. Some of them were doing community service. Some of them were actually staff for that bingo hall that night and of United Desert Charities. And so I tell Patrick, get the fuck over there where this desk is at. And he starts walking back towards the back of the building where the desk is, and I point the gun at the 2 ladies to the side, and I tell them, get the fuck over there with him, and they walk over there with him, and everybody is stunned. Everybody's just like, whoa, they can't believe that at like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, some kid's in here trying to rob them at gunpoint. My crime partner hears the bathroom flush, and he says, there's somebody in the bathroom, go get him. So I walk over to the bathroom, and this guy, Andrew Arcienega, who's, I don't know if I can say his name or not. I like to say the names because one of the things that I learned out of my time in prison is that it's important to it's important to say the names of the victims, to say the names of the people. It's a way of it's a way of putting remorse into action, I guess, The least I could do is know their name. So anyways, Andrew Arcienega is in the bathroom. He comes walking out, and I pull the gun up, and I go, put the fucking mop down and I tell him to get over there where the rest of the people are at. And when I walk over to where they are, I look around and my crime partner's gone. He's not in the building. And so I panic. I'm like, whoa, where the fuck is this guy at? And all of a sudden, these blinds move to this sliding glass door that I didn't realize was behind them. And he comes walking back in and he's panicking. And he's on a walkie-talkie and he calls to our getaway driver and he tells me, we gotta go. A lady just ran out the side door and she's running down the street screaming. So we abandon the robbery. I tell the people to go inside of this office that's like right behind the desk. We turn around and we run out and we jump into the getaway car and we drive off and we get away. And about 5 minutes later, we pull up to his house, and the house I was staying at is just a few houses up. And I start to walk up towards that house right there. And as I'm walking up, a squad car comes pulling out from the alley behind my house and he sees me. And the guy jumps out and he draws his firearm, the officer does, and he tells me and Brandon's older brother, who was walking up with me, to get down. So Brandon's older brother throws a walkie-talkie and he takes off running. I put my hands up and I drop down to my knees and the officer comes up and he hooks me up, cuffs me, and he throws me into the back of the cop car. A guy named Officer Torres, Detective Torres. And the crew that I had been a part of had been under investigation for a long time. You know, these dudes had been doing some pretty serious shit. So there was like a lot of investigation work that was going into them. And when they heard the call get put out for a white and a black male, they had remembered picking me up a few months before and being a part of this crew. And so they drove to the location that was my address, and that's why that officer was there, just off of a hunch. So when he saw me, we fit the description. He was like, yo, these are the guys right here. So anyways, he hooks me up, puts me in the back of the cop car, and he starts driving around looking for Brandon's older brother, right? And they don't find him. So they take me to the station. When they take me to the station, I'm denying everything. I was saying I was at a liquor store around the corner. I don't know why you guys are fucking with me. And I was just like not accepting any responsibility at all. I wasn't taking any accountability. And they take me off to juvenile hall. And in Lancaster, when you get busted, you go to Challenger first, which is a big youth camp. And then when Monday rolls around, they have a bus called the Gray Goose that comes and picks you up. And then you get shackled up, they put you on it, and they drive you down to Sylmar, where they have the big juvenile hall facility. And so I spend the weekend, that night, that Sunday night I spend in Challenger in the box. And I remember just seeing like these kids coming around and stuff, and everybody looked, you know, serious, and everybody was incarcerated. And I was like, oh man, like what the fuck is gonna happen? And I was facing 16 months in juvenile camp for an attempted armed robbery at that time. So anyways, this kid notices my tennis shoes. I had some Chuck Taylors on with blue laces. And this dude says, yo, man, what size shoes are those? And I'm like, size 9, why? He's like, oh man, can I try them on? So I'm thinking to myself like, I don't know, that sounds weird. So I tell him no. And the way that I said it, I don't know why, but this dude asked me, he goes, yo, man, where you from? I said, I'm from Raymond Crip. So anyways, he laughs and he looks at me and goes, you from Raymond Crip? And I go, yeah. And he goes, man, fuck Raymond Crip. This Inglewood families. And I'm like, damn, okay, it's going to kick off. So we're all shackled up and stuff, and we get on the bus. And as we're getting on the bus, this dude's like looking at me and he's turning around and he's like, as soon as we get these cuffs off, I'm going to fuck you up. And I'm like, oh man, this fucking dude. So we get down to Sylmar, and they put us into this little room, and they keep that guy on the bus because he was going to go to Central, which is a completely different juvenile hall. In LA County, you got 3 juvenile halls, Sylmar, Central, and LP. And LP was like Long Beach, Gardena, South Bay. Central was like East LA, South Central LA, and so forth. And Sylmar was all of the Valley. It was all of San Fernando, Pacoima, you know, Lancaster, all of those types of things. So anyways, I'm thinking that he's going to get off, they're just going to take him that way and that I'm not going to have to deal with it. So I'm like low key, just kind of like happy about it, you know? And as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden he comes walking in and they take the cuffs off of him and he walks into the thing and he sits next to me And as he's walking up, he tells me, "Scoot the fuck over, white boy." And I'm like, man. So I scoot over, and he sits down. And when he sits down, he turns around, and he just is getting ready to say something, and I jump up, and I crack him. Bah! And me and him start fighting. Boom, 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 boom. Staff runs in, they spray us with pepper spray. I haven't even been in the halls one day yet, you know, just coming out from that transferring unit of Challenger. And that was kind of like the beginning of my incarceration right there, because my name started to, you know, spread out amongst the institution that I was down in this type of way. So they take us into the shower, they rinse off the pepper spray, they send him off to Central, they send me up the hill. I go to this unit, it was the E&F. I'm in E&F for about 2 weeks, and all of a sudden the staff shows up and they're like, "Hey, we're transferring you over to the Y unit." And I'm like, "The Y unit?" Now at this time in Sylmar, Y and Z and X and W were like the hardcore units of the institution. The Y unit was for everybody that's going to youth authority or coming back from youth authority for new charges, or they're fighting a fitness hearing of whether or not they're going to be tried as an adult. X and W were all of the unfit module, which meant that it was the juveniles that were no longer being tried in juvenile court. They were all being tried as an adult. And so it was like the high power of the institution. So when they sent me to the Y unit, I was like, why am I going to the Y unit? You know, and what they did was they let me know that the district attorney had decided to amend the charges to kidnap for robbery with people being moved a certain amount of feet in the building. And they gave me a different count for everybody, and that they were going to be trying me as an adult. I was going to go fight a fitness hearing. I had never heard of that before. You know, I had no idea that juveniles could even be tried as an adult. So anyways, I'm like confused, and I'm asking what it means. I walk into the unit, in the Y unit. It's all these serious dudes. There's probably 7 dudes from Hoover who we were beefing with at the time, right? So I got to get down with all these guys right here. There was probably 2 Crenshaw Mafias. There's always a gang of Pasadena Denver Lanes, which they're all enemy neighborhoods of Raymond. And so now I'm the only Raymond in this unit, and I got all these enemies right here, and it's getting ready to be a rough ride. And so anyways, I start fighting with these guys and garnering respect from them. I start going to juvenile court. And a fitness hearing is supposed to be 5 requirements to try you as an adult. The sophistication of the crime, your past criminal record, the seriousness of the crime, and maybe there's 4 of them, and whether or not there's been any intervention, you know, at all. Like, have I been to camp, or have I been to juvenile hall? Have I received any type of therapy? These are all like factors that go into whether or not a judge is going to try you as an adult. But at this time in the early 2000s, man, there was a campaign to try juveniles as an adult. It was coming out of the late 90s where, you know, with politics and everything in Los Angeles and high crime, they were calling these juvenile super predators. And there was this whole movement to lock them up, throw away the key, go hard on crime type of thing. And so I was like coming into the institution and coming into the system right at this moment of when all of these different things were taking place. And so what happened was they found me unsuitable or unfit to be tried as a juvenile. They bound me over to adult court. They gave me a different count for everybody in the building. They charged me with kidnap for robbery for each person. That carries a mandatory minimum 7 to life. They attached a 10-year gun enhancement to each one of those right there. I took it to trial and lost, which set precedent. It created new boundaries for the district attorney to be able to try people for kidnap robbery. And then they sentenced me to the equivalent of life without in prison. I just was like, I couldn't believe it. You know, I couldn't believe that I was being sentenced to life in prison. And I walked out of there, man, with more time than Charles Manson, literally. So I turn 18, and they send me up to the county jail, Men's Central. And I get up there, and, I'm still a full-fledged gang member at this time. So I tell the people in the unit that I'm a Crip. And my second day, I get called for a visit from my mom. And as I start walking towards the visit in the hallway, these white guys snatch me up, and they drag me into a room, and they beat me unconscious. I thought they were going to kill me, and an officer walks in and kind of like stops the situation from happening, and I wake up, and there's blood everywhere, and this officer's over me flashing a flashlight, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I tell him, "I'm fine. I slipped and hit the mailbox." And he looks at me and he smiles and he says, "You want to roll with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "All right, we'll go on back out there then." And so he sends me back out into the hallway. And I go down and I see my mom, and she starts crying. And I tell her I'm going to be okay. And I spent the next probably 2 years in the county jail waiting to be sent up to prison.
You had not murdered anybody, yet you got life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the only juvenile in the history of American law that got sentenced to the equivalent of life without, where there was no firearm discharged, nobody was killed, nobody was physically hurt, and I had no past criminal record. So, it kind of became a big deal. So I go through the county, and man, Men's Central was no joke. In my first 3 months, 6 people had been killed in my unit alone, beaten to death, their bodies drugged to the front of the day rooms, strangled, or the officers. The officers had killed a couple people. And this is a time when Sheriff Lee Baca was the head sheriff in LA County. I mean, he's been indicted now and, was sentenced to prison and all of these different things. But at that time, he was the big dog. And so all the officers below him, it came up with that culture, man, it's the old school shit where they had the batons and things like that, big mag flashlights. Nuts to butts is what they called it. When you sat down going through processing and stuff like that, they stripped you down naked, and then they made you scoot all the way up against each other so that way your nuts touched the guy's butt in front of you. And it's all about just like the degradation and embarrassment, trying to get people to feel that way. So I was 18 years old, just turned 18 years old when they dropped me off at the county. And there was a war going on in the early 2000s. 2003, in Men's Central, you had a war between the gangsters, it's called a gangster car, and the neighborhoods, right, and the Crips. So the neighborhood Crips and the gangster Crips. Now the Hoovers, they align with the gangster Crips. And the Raymonds, and a lot of the Rolling Hundreds and stuff, they align with the neighborhood Crips. And this war that was taking place was really, really bloody. There was a lot of murders that were going on. And if you got caught slipping, which is what is called in the county jail, man, they were snatching people on it. They were kidnapping people and dragging them up to the 4,000 floor. They were beating them to death. There was gang members from gangsters that were being put on the 2,000 floor. And the guys on the 2,000 floor were just like, they were killing them and beating them up and all these different things. So there was this huge war that was going on. And the unit that I went into was called 2628. And you have 2 tiers. You have the bottom and the top, Abel, Baker, Charlie, and Denver row. And 6-man cells on the bottom, 4-man cells on top. And the 6-man cells was so overcrowded, you had 8 people in the 6-man cells, and then the 4-man cells had 6 people in them. So there was 2 people sleeping on the floor. They were given mats and put in the cell, and that's it. And so you had to fight for your bunk. If you got assigned a bunk, and another guy came in and he was assigned the floor. As soon as he stepped in the cell and the officers left, he was going to turn around and be like, yo, that bunk's mine, you know? So you had to fight for your shit in that county jail. And I was no different. I had to go through that same type of stuff. So anyways, there was this power struggle on the 2000 floor amongst the neighborhoods. At first, it was all the Rolling 60 Crips had all of the juice and they had all of the control of the unit. They had control of the drugs, they had control of the moves, and they were the big dogs. All of a sudden, there was this huge influx of East Coast Crips that came into the county, and they were put onto the 2000 floor. And so they immediately started to plot on how can they be the ones that control the unit. They want the money, they want the drugs, and they want the power. And so the East Coast move on the Rolling 60s, on the shot callers from it, and they take control of the unit. And I remember there was a homeboy of mine from Raymond named Bardog, rest in peace. He had been in county jail for like 7 years fighting a murder. And so everybody knew him. And he came down to the 2000 floor in order to be able to be with me. You know, he wanted to try to, I was the only Raymond down there at the time. He was hearing about me. He had never met me because he had been in jail for so long. And so he wanted to come down and meet me, meet the white boy from the neighborhood and all that type of stuff. So he comes down, we move into a cell together. And then all of a sudden, probably 3-4 days later, some of the East Coast pop up on the cell door and they're like, hey man, your brother's here. And I'm thinking it's my real brother. But it was Brandon's older brother that was on a completely different case. He had already got away with the case that we were on, and by me not cooperating, I was the only one riding the beef. So he comes in on domestic violence, and he gets moved into the cell with us. And the East Coast come back to the cell, and they say that they want for Bardog to get pulled out of the cell into what's called the trustee day room in order to get disciplined because he had fought an East Coast Crip up on the 4000 floor and had beat him up. And so they were like, you know what, you're down here in our unit now. We want Bardog to come out and we want to fight him and we're going to what's called discipline him, you know. You know, the Raymonds were a little bit different because they were a small gang, but they were a really tight gang. And one of the things that I was always told was nobody disciplines a Raymond but a Raymond. You know, you can't. So for me, I felt like, man, what are these East Coast doing talking about they're going to pull the homeboy out and they're going to go discipline him? And so the three of us, me, Brandon's brother, and Bardog, man, we all decide, man, Bardog's not going out there. I mean, fuck these dudes, you know? They're going to have to come in here if they're going to want to get Bardog. We're not going unless they're going to have all of us go out there, and then we'll just line it up with the East Coast car. So they say, man, we're not lining shit up. If you don't let Bardog come out here, we're going to rack the cell door, and we're going to come in here. We're going to handle all you guys. So we say, fuck it, let's do it. They start lining up on the cell door, and there's probably maybe 6, you know, guys that are out there, East Coast Crips. They rack that door and they run in there, and sure enough, man, we all start getting busy, big time. And while that was going on, we're fighting all the way through. Hair's getting pulled out, you know, the whole thing is taking place. It's done. The guys leave. Bardog and I look at each other, and Brandon's brother comes rolling out from underneath the bunk. And we look at each other, and I think that was like one of the first times that this illusion, the bubble, had popped about like how I looked up to Brandon's brother. Because I felt like, man, you know, we're all willing to give our life for this, and you're hiding underneath the bunk, you know, when this is taking place. And it was like the first time that I had seen this in him, and I felt like it was weak, and I felt like it was soft. And it was an important moment because as time was going by, I was starting to question whether or not I wanted to be in this anymore. Did I want to be a Crip anymore? Did I, you know, all these different things I was going through. And, you know, it was just, it just was an enlightening moment that I never forget. So anyways, I lose my trial. I I get sent upstate and I go to Tehachapi Max. I get inside of the reception center, and when I'm in the reception center, two white guys move on me, two skinheads move on me on the yard, because once you get to the state, it's different than the county. In the county jail, even though I was targeted for being a white Crip, it was all about gang activity. But when you get to the state, it's about racial activity. Now it's the entire race is involved. So blacks go with the blacks, whites go with the whites, Mexicans and Latinos are split up in between two factions, the North and the South, and then you have what's called the others, which is Islanders, Asians, Native Americans, and so forth. So anyways, I get to Tehachapi, and they ask me on the yard who I roll with. I tell them I'm a Crip. Obviously, that causes a whole lot of buzz on the yard. And I'm walking to chow one day, and on my way back, these two skinheads jump on me, try to stab me, and we all go to the hole. And that was kind of like the beginning of my journey in the state. I go from Tehachapi, from the reception up to 4A. 4A, which is called a 180 yard in the state of California, and a 180 is the highest maximum security that you can be at. It's called 180 because of the design, and there's the tower that has a 180 view of all the different cells, and they're cut off into sections, so that way they have the most amount of control over the population. So I go up to 4A, and when I get there, I'm there for maybe about 2 weeks before it kicks off again. Skinheads are sent at me, they stab me, and we all go back to the hole, and we all catch what's called a SHU term, segregated housing unit. So we go to the SHU, 4B. I finish up a 6-month SHU term, and I go to open up this new prison called Kern Valley State Prison, which was a super prison that Arnold Schwarzenegger had approved the funding for, and it had opened up. And it was a SHU kickout yard. Now, a SHU kickout yard meant that all these guys what's going to go to the yard and go open up that institution is people coming out of the SHU. So it's all the big dogs, all the fucking gangsters, all the shot callers, all the foot soldiers, the ones that are really putting in work are going up here to open this place up and start to establish the boundaries of what belongs to who. This handball court belongs to the Southsiders and the whites. This handball court belongs to the blacks. This water fountain belongs to the fucking, blacks. These showers belong to so-and-so. And then they start to establish the drug trade. And, here goes the hierarchy of the prison and the structure of it. So anyways, I get on the bus, and as I'm riding on this bus, it's coming from Calipat. And Calipat had this huge riot between the Southsiders and the correctional officers, where the Southsiders had moved on the correctional officers, and during that time, the officers had shot one of them and killed, one of the Southsiders during the riot. And so the institution was like, we're bussing all these motherfuckers out. So they put all these dudes, all the shot callers and Calipat and stuff, they put them on the bus, and they stop off at Tehachapi. I get out of Tehachapi onto the bus, and one of the people on there was this dude named Big Ben Dog from Raymond, who's like a legend. And they sit me next to this dude from Hoover with one eye. I don't even know his name. But he looks at me when they sit me next to him, and he goes, "The fuck you sitting next to me for, white boy?" Like that. And I said, or no, Wood. "The fuck you sitting next to me for, Wood?" I look at him and say, "I ain't no Wood, I'm a fucking Crip." And he went, "You're a what? You're a Crip?" I went, "Yeah." He goes, "From where?" So, "I'm from Raymond." "Which one?" "I'm from all of them." "Doesn't matter which one, I'm from all of them, man. Pasadena, 10 Deuce, 120, pick. So anyways, he like laughs and chuckles about it, and he leans back and he goes, "Yo, Ben Dog, dude right here says he's your lil homie." And all of a sudden, this guy like turns around, little fro and glasses, tattoos on his face, right? Older guy. And this is before tattoos on the face were popular. It was like the older guys that had it. It was a different level of gangster that had the tattoos on their face. So I look at him and I'm like, damn, like it was like meeting a celebrity, And he looks at me and he goes, "You from Raymond?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "All right, when we get to Kern Valley, we'll chop it up." So I'm like, okay. So anyways, we get to Kern Valley. They start taking everybody off the bus and they leave me on the bus, and the officers come in and they cuff me, and then they go and they put me in a separate tank that's right next to everybody else. And I said, what the fuck you guys putting me over here for? And he's like, well, it's for your protection. I said, I don't need no protection, man. You know, put me over there with the homeboy. And they're like, you sure? And I go, yeah. So they take me out of the tank, they put me into that tank, and they're like, good luck. So they go walking off. Ben Dog and I start talking. And, you know, at first he's asking me all these questions to try to figure out, who am I? You know, he hadn't heard of me yet or anything like that. And was I really who I said I was? Meaning, am I really from Raymond? Or am I some kid that's from the Valley that's like, you know, almost like, am I exactly what I am? Am I a kid from the Valley who's like just pretending to be this, you know? But, you know, I was really from it. So anyways, Ben Dog's little brother is this dude named Big Joker, who's, man, he's everybody knows Big Joker. And so Ben Dog, we get to the yard. We're on A yard, and nobody there. I mean, there was dust from the cement still in the cells. That's how new this place was. And he goes out and he gets on the phone to do, you know, a quick little background check on me. He gets off the phone and he comes back in and he says, man, I talked to my brother, man. He goes, and he's got so much fucking love for you. He says to look after you and stuff. And so Ben Dog like fully embraces me. And I felt like really good because this was the first time that I was around an older dude in the joint. I had just been moved on into Tehachapi on multiple yards. And now I felt like, man, like a little bit of safety almost, you know, like, man, all right, I got a shot caller that's basically behind me now. And so we get called for our first yard and we go out there and Ben Dog says, I got to go holler at the woods, you know, and we got to start politicking, make sure you can stay here. So he goes over to the wood pile, man, and the shot caller from the woods and him, they all get together and I'm like standing off to the side. I don't know what's being said or anything like that. And Ben Dog comes back and we go into the cell and he goes, man, bro, we just need to be ready because, you know, they're not going to let you stay on this yard. They're going to move on you. And what do you want to do? I said, I ain't going fucking nowhere, man. Let them move on me. You know, this Raymond Crip. So about 2 days later, we're still in the cell. We're in the cell for 24 hours out of the day. Yard hasn't been called back up yet. The institution A yard is on standby because of me. I'm the only white Crip on the yard. And so they're trying to like figure out and mitigate the issues that are going on behind having me on this yard. And at night, probably around 8 o'clock at night, all of a sudden IGI, which is like the, you know, they're like the special forces of the institution in this way. They come and they raid the cell and they take me off to the hole. And when they take me to the hole, it's because they had received information that my life was in jeopardy. And so they, as the institution, have an obligation to intervene and pull me back there to see whether or not I want to go into protective custody or if I want to go into what's called an S&Y, which is a sensitive needs yard, kind of the same thing, and stop it, you know, from taking place so that there's no liability. So they get me back there. I go to a committee. I tell the committee I don't want any protection, and I sign a liability waiver. I give them an address that where they want my body to be sent to if I get killed, you know, who to get contact if, and things like that. And then, boom, they send me back out to the yard. And instead of sending me over to A yard, they send me over to, I'm sorry, it was on D yard that I started, and then they sent me over to A yard. And A yard had like a hub of Raymonds. There was like 7 other Raymonds on the yard. So I think the institution was trying to like get me where they felt like I would have the best chance to survive whatever was going on, or if it was a strong enough amount of force that maybe the whites weren't going to move on me because, you know, it was too dangerous for them. Either way, that shit didn't fucking work, you know, because they sent me over to the A yard, and shortly after that, the yard kicks off over me. And I walked out. I remember when it happened where it was all being talked about and there was a bunch of incidents leading up to it. But the actual day that it took place, we were coming off of a lockdown, and I walk out to the yard, and it was this clear blue sky, man. I just remember looking at that, and I remember looking up at it and feeling like, you know, I don't know why, that just hit me that way. And as I was walking laps with the fellas, because I was backed by the Crips, all of the guys on the yard were all supporting me. The gang, you know, being from Raymond, it pulled a lot of respect and a lot of support from all the other Crips that were on the yard because of just the reputation of who the Raymonds are. And so because they were claiming me, man, all the Crips had my back. And so I'm walking laps, and as I'm walking laps, I get to this point where I'm like, you know what, fuck it. I'm like tired of waiting. You know, if I keep waiting, man, these guys are gonna move on me and I'm gonna get hurt. And so why don't we just get it out of the way right now? And so I walk up to this water fountain that was the closest thing to where the wood pile or where the whites were at. And when I got up close to that, I remember drinking a little bit from the fountain, and this guy nudging me that was with me, and he goes, yo, man, they're looking at you. And I stood up, and I looked over at the whites, and they were all leaning down, and they were whispering amongst themselves. And when I was looking at them, one of them looks back at me, and I said, what the fuck you looking at like that? And he stood up, he went, what? And I said, what the fuck you looking at? And then they rushed me, boom, you know, and they hit me like a brick fucking wall, man. Knocked me back over the track. I windmilled down into the dirt, and I just remember feeling all of them on me. And somehow I made my way back to my feet, and I'm like looking around, and the yard has exploded. All of the Crips and the blacks run from the basketball court. They run into the whites, man, and this huge riot is now taking off. Officers are shooting. Tear gas is being blasted onto the yard. There's commands, alarms are going off, all that stuff. I'm fighting with guys. And finally we get to this place of where everybody's exhausted and everybody's just like starting to prone out onto the ground and comply with the commands from the correctional officers to get down and prone out and stop and all of that. So the officers run out, they put my hands behind my back, and they start zip tying me, and they're running around all the different inmates, and they're like, boom, they're zip tying them all up, and they lean me up. And all of a sudden I see medical running out. And when medical runs out, this woman's eyes like widen up, and I'm looking at her, and she starts running towards me, and she goes, oh my God. And I'm like, what? And she gets to me, and she starts holding my neck together. And I didn't realize that during the fight, some guy had taken a razor blade and had cut me from here all the way to here. So I'm bleeding. I look down, and I'm just gushing blood. And she's holding my neck, and they wrap me all full of gauze, and then they rush me off to the hospital, and the hospital sews me up, you know. And it was crazy because it was like, I think the doctor said it was about a 0.5 millimeter away from nicking the artery, you know. And I just like, man.
Jugular vein?
Yep. Yeah. So so they stitch me up, they wrap me up, ask me what's going on. I tell them, you know, no comment. And they take me back to the yard. And then they sit me down with everybody that's all participants, and we're all zip tied. And they go through, they get all the woods, man, they put them onto the transfer buses, and they take them to the ADSEG, which is like the whole 24-hour confinement. They leave us, all the Crips and the fellas, they leave us in the middle of the field until probably about 2, 3 in the morning. They put the sprinklers on us. It was like January in the high desert, so it was fucking freezing, man. And then when we're just like wiped out, they take us to the hole, and they put me back there. And I did probably about 8 months back there. And during that time, it was like the first time that I was like alone in a cell. I didn't have a cellie or anything. And so I started to really reflect on things a lot. I was about 21 at this time. And I started to think about like, what is my life? You know, and why did I do this? And the whole point of me running away from home was because I was supposed to go make my life better, you know? And now here I was, you know, just like I was in prison inside of prison, targeted and green lighted, and it wasn't even about gangs anymore. Now I was a race trader, you know? So I get this cellie from San Diego, a Crip from San Diego, and he tells me, I don't know why the fuck you're doing this, man. You got life in prison. He says, if I were you, I would just go over to the S&Y, man, and move on with my life, you know? And that's like the protective custody. And I was like, man, I'm not fucking going over there, man. You know, that's where like child molesters and snitches and like, and there goes my gang career. You know, there is no more, if I do that, I'm no longer a Crip. And he was like, well, why the fuck you want to be a Crip anyways? And I was like, how are you going to tell me that you're a Crip? You know, how are you going to tell me why would I want to be a Crip, man? And he's like, look, man, you think your neighborhood, you think anybody in here, all that, you think anybody really actually gives a fuck, you know, about whether or not you're a Crip or not? Half the guys probably don't even want you around because when you hit the yard, that's jeopardizing everything. The yard's going on lockdown, they got to support you, all this different type of stuff. You know, he was like, and you know what? If you were to leave tomorrow or die today, he goes, in 6 months from now, nobody's even going to fucking talk about it. Because there's 5 other deaths and there's 5 other people and there's, you know, and it, like had that have left in that meantime right there. You're not as important as you think you are. And that shit hit me, you know, where I was like, damn. So they're getting ready to put me on a bus after those 8 months to go to, I think it was Pelican Bay. It's either Salinas Valley or Pelican Bay. And the day before my bus ride, there's this counselor named CC2 White. And the counselors are like a caseload worker. They handle your file and they do all of those different things. And this woman had, from the very beginning of her getting my file, had been like asking me to denounce my membership and like leave the gang and go on onto these other yards where my life would be completely different. And so she looks at me, she pulls me into her office that day before and she says, you're on a bus in the morning. She said, that would probably kill you eventually at your next spot or the spot after that. If not, you'll spend the rest of your life in the hole. It's probably the only place you'll be safe. She says, if you want, you can tell me that you want to leave all that and I'll get you moved out of the cell. I'll have you out of the hole in 30 days and you'll go on to a yard that programs and your whole life will be different. And impulsively, I looked at her and I said, let's do it. And she goes, are you fucking serious? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And she said, okay. So they take me back to the cell. They pull out my cellie from San Diego and they put us in these cages next to each other. And when they put us in these cages, the dude looks at me and he goes, you did it, huh? And I went, yeah, man, I did it. I'm done. And he goes, good for you. Good for you, man. I wish you the best of luck. And so I was like, man, like I didn't know what to think. This was my only, as dangerous as it was, this was at least something that I knew. I had been surviving like this for a few years. And so I was like feeling really just like, what have I done, you know? And they take me out of the cage and they bring me over to the cell and I start gathering up my property. And as I'm gathering up my property, all the fellas on the tier, all the Crips, right? Jaywalk from 8-7 Gangsters and Nutcase from West Covina neighborhood and, you know, all these different dudes, man. They start yelling down. You know, they can't see anything, but they're yelling down and they're like, yo, you guys good down there? And I'm just not saying anything. I'm staying silent. I'm like, really, actually, I'm feeling a lot of shame and embarrassment and feeling like I ranked out, like I couldn't cut it. So I gather my stuff up and they put me in the tier over and I can hear them all trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. They take my cellie from San Diego, they put him back in the cell. I can hear them yelling over to him and they're like, hey, where's Lil Raymond at? And he goes, I don't know. And they go, you don't know? Nah, they just came and took his property and got him. And so I hear one of them be like, man, this motherfucker locked it up. And I was like, oh, like that shit hit my heart because I always like prided myself on being down, you know, and going through these things and cowboying up in this way, you know. I was just like, it was definitely like a, you know, an ego check for sure. So I'm in the cell and I'm hearing all these guys yelling, oh man, I wonder if he dropped out and this and that, da-da-da, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I get on the tier and I yell out, yo, yo. And the tier goes quiet. And I go, look, man, my name is Tyler Corcoran. I'm not young Y anymore. I'm not from Raymond anymore. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. And I'm done. And there's this long pause, pregnant pause, man, on that tier. Because everybody knows what that means, you know? That means that, like, when you check in, when you leave all that behind, you're no longer good to the main line. The main line is now what the whites were to me, the entire main line is to me now, you know? Because now I had checked in and I had locked it up and I had said I wasn't a gang member anymore and all this different type of stuff. So anyways, there's this long pause and one of the dudes on the tier goes, it's like that, huh? And I say, yeah, it's like that. And he goes, all right, well, you know what time it is if these doors open? And I said, yeah, I know what time it is. And I was like, okay. And it goes quiet. And this dude in the vent next to me, he whispers through the vent, hey, man, hey, Tyler? And I'm like, yeah. And it felt weird to hear my name. I'd been going by Y for so long from this gang. Like the moment that I started to become a gang member, Tyler was like, you just didn't hear it. You know, it was like a cheesy thing to be called by your first name, you know? So it's weird, you know, for this guy to call me Tyler.
Your gang name was Y?
Yeah, they call me Young Y from Raymond Ave. So anyways, he whispers through the thing and he goes, what happened? And I said, man, I can't do it anymore. I go, everywhere I go, I'm the one that's going through it. I'm the one that's going to the hole. I'm the one that's being targeted. I'm the one that's this. And I'm like, and half the time it's like, you know, it feels like the fellas are like, don't want to support, you know, like I'm going out here and I'm putting my life on the line for being from Raymond. If I'm not from Raymond, then I wouldn't even be fucking targeted right now because of this. And I feel like I'm not getting that same in return, you know, from everybody. And he just kind of like absorbed that for a minute and he tells me, man, he goes, you know what, man? I think that it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing, you know, and I wish you a lot of luck. And I was like, wow, man, I didn't expect that. And so I said, you know, I just told him thanks. And so anyways, within 30 days, a bus comes and picks me up and it takes me down to Calipat. And D yard is the S&Y, the sensitive needs yard. And I get out onto this yard and I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that I wasn't a Crip anymore. And I knew that I didn't want to be a Crip anymore. And I get to this yard and right when I get there, these two guys are stabbing this other guy in the middle of the yard. Stab his eye out and all types of shit. And they life flight this guy out, and I'm like, this does not seem like a protective custody yard, you know, if a guy's getting fucking stabbed up. And I didn't know what to expect on these yards because it was lawless, meaning like you don't have the structure and the power of the gangs that have been for generations in the state of California controlling things. I mean, as far back as like the 50s on the main line. The 50s on the main line, you had the beginning of the Aryan Brotherhood, you had the beginning of the MA, you had the beginning of the fucking Black Guerrilla family, and from then on, the races have controlled, you know, the institutions, basically, all that time. And so now I'm on this yard where it's saying that none of that exists. And so anyways, I start trying to sign up for anything that I could that I felt was going to be like productive, right? Self-help groups, AANA, victims awareness classes. And I was just trying to find a way to like move forward with my life and have some type of like meaning and purpose that was going on. And I talked to my dad and I asked him, I said, man, I don't know what to do. And I was starting to feel this level of shame and guilt, behind everything. Because ultimately, man, I felt when I was a kid, man, all I wanted was to be the good guy. It was always the hero in the movies. I didn't want to be the villain. And now, like, I wasn't a Crip anymore. And I didn't feel like Tyler anymore. I didn't know where to go or what to do. And I was like 22 years old now. And I had life in prison. And so I told my dad, I'm like, man, dude, I don't know how to go on like this. And he told me, he goes, man, it may not be the life that you want, and it may not be the life that you would have chose. He goes, but it's your life, and your life has meaning and it has purpose. And I think like that was the beginning of what true remorse was like entering into my life. Because I looked at everything like, man, like, what a fucking waste. And all this hurt, me, even the dudes from the gang, everywhere I went, man, they all got fucked up because of me being on the yard, refusing to leave and all this shit. Innocent people in the bingo hall, people in the fucking Ralphs. Here I was, this person who, like, of my own shit, my own anger, and I'm gonna run away to a community that's already fucking struggling. Add to their trauma. Go play make pretend and fucking, but with real actions, real consequences. And I just like, I felt so ashamed of all of it. And I told myself, I said, man, I don't give a fuck if I got life in prison. No more excuses. Like, I'm going to take all that energy that I had into destruction and being fucking hurtful, and I'm going to channel that into having it be that my purpose is to grow, is to improve, and is to help wherever the fuck I'm at. And man, it was like this finally I had like a direction, that I could put myself into. So I get this cellie named Big Hat Miller from San Bernardino, this old biker. And he had heard, about my past of being a Crip and stuff. And normally this is the type of guy that his history is where he's like, he would have been one of the guys that fucking targeted me. But instead, what had happened in his life was his daughter had moved to North Carolina and married a black guy, and Hap had disowned her for marrying a black guy, said no daughter of mine is going to be with something like that, And over the telephone, he told her that she wasn't his daughter anymore and he wanted nothing to do with her. And about 2 weeks later, she died in a car crash. And it fucked him up. And when I landed on the yard, he saw me as an opportunity to try to like go back and maybe do something right, you know? He saw me as this person who, you know, was a Crip and hung out with the blacks and all this stuff. And so for him, his normal reaction that would have been like, man, fuck that dude, you know? He wants to be over there with them, be over there with them. Instead, he was like, man, this kid is fucking lost. And he wanted to do something right. So he moves me in the cell. And I don't know all this is going on. He doesn't tell me this until years later. But he moves me in the cell. And one day I'm on the top bunk and I'm watching TV and he says, what do you do? And I go, well, what do you mean, what do I do? Because what do you do with your life? What do you do with your time? Work out, read. So how do you take care of yourself? Man, every now and again my dad sends me money for canteen and that type of thing. And he says, man, I think you're a good kid. I hope everything works out for you. He goes, but right now you got life in prison. And it's not that your family doesn't love you or anything like that, but parents pass away. Your brothers might have families and move on. And you need to know that you can take care of yourself. And he says, if you want, I'll teach you how to draw. And you'll always be able to take care of yourself in here through drawing. And I was like, oh, man, all right. And he says, let me tell you why drawing is a good thing. He said, you won't have the money that the drug dealer does. The drug dealer is going to be stacked with canteen and all these different things. He says, but the drug dealer, it can go like this. As soon as they get caught, everything gets confiscated and they got to start all over again. He goes, with your artwork, that won't happen. You'll always be able to keep with what you have. He goes, and you won't have to start over. You'll only continue to go forward. And it just resonated with me. And so I said, let's do it. And we started off with like precious moment cards and Valentine's cards for guys that were, you know, wanting to send things home to loved ones. And I decided I was going to set a work schedule. I had never had a job up to this point. I was about 23 now. I had never really like earned anything like that in my life in that way. Even robbery is just going and taking from somebody. So my idea of like what work ethic was or to have pride in something that I did was like nothing. So I committed myself to the artwork and I set an 8-hour schedule Monday through Friday with a 1-hour lunch break. I thought about like how my dad works and that was kind of like the framework that I did. I was like, well, he went to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then the weekends were off and you have an hour lunch break. And so I was just like trying to imitate that in some type of way. And as time went by, I started to get better and better and better. And I went away from just precious moments cards and I started to do portraits. And then from portraits, I started to do still life. And from still life, I started to explore surrealism and impressionism and abstract. And like I started to dive into the more kind of like advanced, sophisticated ways of looking at art. I started thinking about composition and balance, detail to region to totality. And I grew as an artist. And I think that was like probably the first time that I had an identity that I was like really proud of. Because even though as being a Crip, I felt proud of being the only white boy, it wasn't like what it feels like when there's something that has the deeper purpose to it, you know, in this way, something that wasn't hurtful in this way. I didn't have to do something that I didn't want to do in order to be able to get what I wanted, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. So I started to paint and draw, got a curator. Curator started to show my work on the outside. I started to have art shows on the outside. I started to dive into college. Found a new love for education, got my GED, got enrolled in college, started taking full load, started to go to all the different self-help courses that I could. And I had this old lifer named Smokey, who had been in since like 1978, who told me like never stop reaching. And what he meant by that was like any opportunity that the institution throws at you, take advantage of it. So I'd sign up for vocational trades, try to get into welding. I was an auto mechanics clerk. I was doing all these different things. And as time was going by, it became less about like, how do I create stability in my life? And I started to think about the ripple effect and the impact that I had in everybody else's life. It became less about me. When I first left the gang, when I first did all those things, those were all about me. That was like, oh, my life and what I'm going through and all of that type of stuff. But once that all started to stabilize, my thoughts drifted towards not me, but like the things that I had done, the way that people were impacted by that. My family, the victims' families, the community at large. I started to think differently where I would go to Chow. I'd be working on an art piece for 6 months. I've been working on this art piece. And then I would go to Chow and I would think about what would it feel like if I came back to the cell and all of a sudden that art piece was gone, you know? I would be upset. I'd feel like who the fuck has invaded my space, like all of these different things. And so I started to connect deeper to the impact of my choices. And I think that's when I started to go into this next level of like what remorse actually is, you know, because remorse doesn't necessarily mean just feeling bad, you know, not to me. It means like you got to put that shit into action. You have to, if you feel bad about something, then there has to be an action behind it. I'm getting kind of lost, but anyways, I'm just trying to stress the fact that that I started to think way beyond just what my needs were. And so anyways, you know, now here it is, probably 12, 13 years in, and I dropped down to a lower level. My points based off of good behavior now at this point, I'm a world away from the identity of being a white Crip. That's just like 13 years later after this, I'm just like a lifer on the yard who's just trying to do the right thing, go to work, stay out of trouble, and see my family on the weekends, you know. And so they send me down to a lower level, and I walk outside for the first time underneath the stars on a night yard, you know, after 13 years, and cried like a baby and felt so thankful. And that was at Centinela State Prison. From Centinela, a few more years passed by, and I dropped down again, down to a level 2. Now I'm no longer in a cell, I'm in a dorm. And I'm having to use all these tools of communication and understanding and like all of that because the cell provided this like safe, small space for me. But now that I'm in this dorm, I have to deal with coexisting with a larger population. And that was like a learning curve. And then one day I get a letter in the mail from the district attorney's office in LA County. And Gascon had been elected into office. You know, there's all this controversy behind it, right? It still is. And one of the things that he was doing was he was combing through all of the cases, juvenile cases, to see like if there was any, what's the term for it? If there was any wrongdoing, you know, in the way that kids were sentenced, prosecuted, things like that, especially after the scandal of Lee Baca and the LA County Sheriff's Department. So my name was one of the first that popped up. And it was because, you know, nobody had been physically hurt and nobody had been killed. The majority of the juveniles that had been tried as adults were all, you know, had murders and things like that, or at least attempted murders. So my case popped up, and he was contacting us to let us know, or the district attorney's office was contacting juveniles and juveniles like me that, you know, he was going to be sending us to, or he was going to be recommending us to be resentenced or to have a judge look at our sentence or relook at it. And then I got a letter from a organization called the JIFS, the Juvenile Innocence and Fair Sentencing Project with Loyola Marymount. And They had heard about me from another attorney named Joe Pertel, and they wanted to speak to me about possible representation, and then collaborating with the district attorney's office to see if there could be any relief for me from my sentence. And that took some years, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, and nothing was going on, and courts had completely shut down. And when COVID was starting to end and the courts were coming back up, I finally got a court hearing set where my case was going to go back in front of a judge. And the advocates from Loyola Marymount had been talking to the district attorney. They've been building a relationship with the judge, talking about me, talking about all the different things, and trying to get it to where the judge would remove the life sentence. And the judge was adamant that she was not going to remove the life sentence, but that she felt what had been done was not right, and she was going to resentence me to be immediately eligible for the parole board. And so they set a court hearing. And because of COVID, there was no transfers and things like that. So my hearing was literally like on speakerphone in the program office on the yard. And my dad went to the courthouse to hear it, the hearing in person on the other end of things. And so this judge gets on and she says, you know, this is the case, da-da-da-da, and People versus Tyler Corcoran. And she says that she takes her job very seriously and that she wants me to become immediately eligible for the parole board. She reiterates that she's reluctant to remove the life sentence in any type of way, and then asks me if I have anything that I want to say. And I did. And I had prepared a speech, and it was kind of like a letter to the victims, and it was a letter to my family. And I just wanted to really touch on a few different things. One was remorse, empathy. I wanted to touch on accountability, and I wanted to touch on who I was then and who I am now. And I want to wrap it all up with gratitude for the opportunity not to have a resentence, not to come home. I kind of had given up on that in a certain way. Instead, what it was I was thankful for the opportunity to have a do-over and do what I should have done from the beginning, which is accept responsibility, say that I fucking did it, own my actions, apologize to everybody for ever being a part of any of that. And when I was done, she unexpectedly took a 20-minute recess. She came back on. She removed all the life sentences. She resentenced me to time served, and I walked out from behind those walls 10 days later. And
wow. How'd you feel about that?
Scared.
How many years had you done?
Just about 20 years. Yeah, I did 19 years. I felt like it's hard to describe because there's like, I felt every hair follicle on my body when she said, I'm going to use my authority to remove the life sentence and resentence you to time served. I felt like my skin was like tingling, and I held my breath. I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid that I was going to fuck it up, you know? So I was just like quiet. And I started to cry in this way that was just like years and years and years of you know, wishing and hoping that I would hear that someday. And then she goes, good luck, and hung up the phone. And I was like, what the, man? And I looked at the officer that was right there, and he goes, what happened? And I said, you're not going to believe this. They just said that I'm going to go home. And I started bawling again. And the guy put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, man, he said, that was powerful. You know, he was right there listening to everything. And I walked out onto the yard, and I'm on this level 2. And there was 2 buddies that were out front that had heard that my hearing was that day. And so they came up to the program office, and they were just sitting on the curb waiting out front for me. And they had known me all the way since I was like 19 years old. One of them from juvenile hall all the way up. So like a long journey of knowing me. And they gave me this big hug, and news started to spread throughout all the buildings, and people flooded out of the buildings, man. And they were just like hugging me and embracing me. And I was like this symbol of hope, to everybody else on the yard. Because I had been in so long, and because I was this kid and grew up in there, and all the things I had been through, everybody knew, I used to be a Crip and like this and that and da-da-da. Like it just was. And they were handing me chips and sodas and like asking me if I could like look over their stuff to see if there was an opportunity for them and like this whole thing. And I spoke until my voice was hoarse. And then that night I went back to the bunk, and I laid on the bunk, man, and I looked up and I couldn't fall asleep. And at about 2 a.m, I was just, tears were flooding out of my eyes, and I was looking around, and I was like, I just wanted it to be over because I felt like I had been skydiving all day. I just wanted to. So I fell out and into sleep, exhausted. And one day turns into 2 days turns into a week. Every time the phone is ringing, I'm thinking it's going to be me, and they're going to tell me that it's me. I know it should be happening anytime. 1 week starts to go into the next week, and now I'm like starting to wonder, like, what the fuck, is this going to happen?
Did you imagine it?
That's right. And I'm like going to the officers, and I'm like, hey, I had this hearing, but like nobody fucking knows. You know what I mean? It's just because a judge said that. It's like until they get orders from something, or until they are told to do something, it's just another Tuesday. So I'm trying to tell myself, just relax, just chill. Next thing you know, I'm getting on the phone, and my family's asking me what's going on. And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been called yet. And finally, they call me over to the program office, and I go in, and the counselor goes, good news and bad news. And I go, fuck, man. And he goes, good news is we got the release order, right? That the life sentence has been removed. The bad news is that your new release date is like, I think they set it for like 6 months away. And I was like, what, why? And he's like, well, because when you are a lifer and you get granted parole, there's a certain amount of time that the victims need to be notified, and like all of these different things. So I'm like reeling with this information. And he's like, that's just what it is. So I go back to the building. I call my dad. My dad gets on the phone. He's like, what happened? I'm like, I just talked to him. They said it at this. And he's like, that doesn't fucking sound right, And I'm like, I don't know, Dad. This is just what they're saying, And he's like, I don't think that's right. And I'm like, man, I'm just thankful that they actually set a date for 6 months from now. I'm just good with that. And he says, I'm going to contact the attorneys. So he contacts the attorneys at Loyola Marymount. They go, that's absolutely not supposed to be what's happening. They contact the judge. The judge says that the clerk had messed up the paperwork, the way that it was, the language in the paperwork, and then had gone on vacation. So now what happened is they had to expedite my release. They're like, we got to get him out of here now, because if there's a certain amount of time that passes by, then we're talking about liability, and like, they're worried about lawsuits and all these things and da-da-da-da. So all of a sudden I get a call on the intercom. Corcoran report down to the podium. I go down in the building. I go down to the podium where the officers are at, and they're like, dude, I don't know what's going on right now, but they need you over at the program office. So I'm like, okay. So I go over to the program office, and they're like, we have to get you prepared to parole immediately. You're going to be leaving. I think it was like 24 hours. They had to get me out the next day. It was the day before Thanksgiving, 2021. It's been 4.5 years now. And so they start driving me all around the institution, and I'm having to you got to do COVID checks at that time, and I'm signing stuff and all these different things. And I'm just like, wow, this is fucking happening. And I get back to the building that day, and that night I felt sad, and it wasn't sad. Like, I felt sad because I felt like I was leaving my home behind. I felt like I was leaving all my friends.
You were institutionalized. My
whole life, and I felt excited for this new chapter. I felt like I wanted to come home. I felt like I was ready to come home. And but I felt just like I should say goodbye in a proper way. And I remember just looking around the building late at night and saying thank you, to myself for all of this different stuff. Not saying thank you me, saying thank you to institutions, to my whole journey up to that point, to the universe for protecting me all this way, for pointing all of these things out to me, for helping me turn my life around. Like, I just felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude for all of it. Because I was 36 at the time, and I was like proud of who I was, and I was proud of the impact that I had had, ever since stepping away from all that other stuff. And the next day they call me, and I go to the R&R, the receive and release, and they put me in these dress outs, and I remember pulling on the clothes for the first time, and I was like, wow, like it just was, I'd been wearing the same state issued stuff since I was 17. It doesn't change from juvenile hall to this adult system. It's all the same material. And I put these clothes on, and I just felt different. And they put me in this van, and they didn't cuff me. And I was like, whoa, like I'm riding with officers and I'm not fucking cuffed. And they take me out in front of the institution. And my dad was there with my brothers and my sister, and they had kids now, and all this stuff. And my stepmom was there, and they had these signs that said, "Welcome home, Tyler." And they had rented this van that everybody could ride in and stuff. And I, let Tyler sit in the front seat. Get Tyler in the front seat. So I get in the front seat. I rolled the window down. Stuck my head out. Feel that fucking wind on my head, I remember we went into Palm Springs and went into a restaurant to grab some breakfast. And I couldn't even eat. I was so overstimulated. I walk outside and look around, open a door, close the door just because I fucking can. And my dad had relocated from Lancaster. Nobody was out there anymore. My biological mother was, but I hadn't seen her or talked to her for almost 15 years, I wrote her a letter back when I was trying to figure everything out. And I had told her that, I had to have some space from her, that she's all the things I was going through, and that if she had any love for me, she wouldn't try to contact me. And she didn't listen to it, but I stuck to it. And for about 15 years, man, I hadn't seen her or talked to her at all. So my dad and stepmom, they had relocated out to Thousand Oaks. I'd never been out there before, had no idea about what it was. And so we drive up to their place, and I'm like, wow, this is nice, out here. And I'd never been anywhere that was like, felt like rich, It's like nice house, safe, good community. And I get out and I start like trying to acclimate. And what was important to me really quick was, or early on, what was really important to me was I was a 36-year-old who had been self-sufficient, taking care of himself and stuff. And when I came home, it was the exact opposite. It was completely reversed. I had never had a bank account, driver's license, credit card. I had never had my own place before. I had never had a job on the outside, never been an adult on the outside world. And so I felt so out of my depth and like intimidated that it was just really unfamiliar to me. I had gotten to the place on the inside where nobody fucked with me. I was self-sufficient. I had respect from people. I took care of myself. I drew. I did all these different things. So I started to try to recreate that world out here. I was like, man, I need to get some art stuff, and and I need to like find a job. You know, it felt very embarrassing to try to like ask my dad for gas money at 36 years old. You know, it embarrassed me that I didn't know how to sign a check, or like, you know, do I tip? Do I not tip? How do I know what to tip? I don't know. Is it 15%, 18%, 20%? You know, all these different things. Self-checkout aisles, social media, texting. There was this whole language with texting that for me, it was like I was writing like letters and putting commas in it and stuff like that, you know. So it was a learning curve. After about a month and a half, I realized like, man, I couldn't be an artist in the same way. I couldn't sit inside and draw and paint for 8 to 10 hours or for 6 hours or fucking 30 minutes, man. You know, I was like, I need to be outside. I need to be in the sun. I need to be underneath the shade of a tree, pet a dog, date a girl, work. And one of the things that I had picked up while I was incarcerated was boxing. I had got around 3 different guys, but all of them fought at a professional level, and they had all taught me in the way that they were taught. And in there, we used to make our focus mitts and things like that out of shower shoes and double in bags. We would take the boxer briefs and bust them apart and then take all the twine out of them and like spin our line and make all of our equipment. And so like I had a pretty good, well-rounded training when it came to boxing. And I was looking for a place to box when I came home because I wanted to be a part of something that felt like familiar to me on the inside. Boxing was a huge portion. On the inside, I got to the place where I was teaching guys. And so I was like, man, I'm going to look for a gym so that way I can like go in and train and still have that be a part of my life. And I walk into a gym in Woodland Hills called Phil Paulina's on Fallbrook. And I go in and there's this old Italian guy who's watching these 2 guys sparring. And it was an old school style gym. It had the ring, had all the, you know, pictures and stuff on the walls, cool stairs led up to it, the sound of it, everything. I just loved it, you know. So I get in there and I'm waiting for Phil to talk to me, and I ask him if I can use some of the equipment. You know, do you mind if I box around in here a little bit? And he's like, nah, go for it. You know, I'll talk to you in a bit. So I wrap up with my own stuff and I start hitting the bags and everything, and guys start asking me about my training and all this stuff. And as they're asking me in there, I start to feel like I'm like being dodgy with how I'm answering stuff. Like they're asking me what other gyms I've been to, what other clubs I've been to. And I'm like, man, I eventually just had to be like, I haven't been to any of that. I just came home from prison, you know? And so when I told him my story, Phil said, don't worry about paying. Don't worry about any of that stuff. You just be in the gym. It's going to be a great place for you. And I love your energy. And I said, all right, man, I was just so thankful for it. So I start going there all the time. I'm like there in the morning. I'm hanging out all day. And I didn't want to be a free ride. So I start helping wrap up the wraps, mopping up the place, sweeping, taking the wraps home, washing them. And I just wanted to be helpful. And then I'm starting to notice that there's like not really anybody being trained that much. You know, Phil's an older guy. There's just kind of members coming in. And so I tell Phil after a couple of weeks and I say, hey man, do you want me to help with some mitts and maybe coach some guys around here? And he goes, Tyler, do you know what the fuck you're doing? You know, and I said, yeah, I know what I'm doing, man. And he goes, all right, I'll keep it in mind. So about 10 minutes later, he calls me into the ring and he puts a couple people in there and he says, man, running through some drills and stuff. So I just did what I'd been doing on the yard, you know, about a month earlier. I start running through some drills and everything. And at the end of it, Phil calls me over and he goes, look, man, shadow me for another 2 weeks. And if at the end of it, I still feel like it, man, I'm going to hire you. And I went, wow. I went home and I told my dad, I said, I think I just got my first fucking job, man. And my dad's like, something doesn't sound right about this place. You know, he's such a skeptic. But anyways, he's like, I go home and I was like super proud, you know. So I started shadowing Phil, and at the end of it, sure enough, he hires me on. And I'm only making like $14 an hour under the table, but I didn't give a shit. It was gas money, and this was my job, you know, first time. And so anyways, as time is going on, Phil starts like entrusting me more and more. And he starts handing me the keys, and then he's like, hey, I got to go to the bank. I'll be back. I don't see him for like 3 days. I'm opening the place up. I'm closing the place. I'm turning the music on. I'm mopping everything out. I'm training the clients, like all of this different stuff. Membership triples within like a month and a half, right? Everybody starts coming in. And one day this guy asked me, will you go train my brother? He'll never come to the gym, but would you be willing to do a house call? This guy named Kyrie. He's a fire captain or something out here in LA County. And I said, yeah. I go, man, I never done a house call, but sure, I was just open to anything and everything, any opportunity. And he said, great, I'll send you the address. So he gives me the address, and the day comes for me to go over to his brother's place. I start driving over there, and it puts me in Bel Air. I'm like, wow, this is fucking nice. All these mansions and all this stuff. And I'm like feeling intimidated. And I pull up to this house, and there's a little speaker out there that the guy talks to me through. He's like, oh, yeah, go through the side. So I go through the side in this backyard, this beautiful home. This guy comes out, and I start training him. And at the end, he goes, man, I really want you to train my kids too. Would you be willing to work with them? And I said, yeah, of course. So his kids come over, and they're like, one's like 10, one's like 13. I train them through an hour. And he's like inviting me back. He's like, man, I love it. And it ends up being this guy named Jay Brown, who is the CEO of the Rock Nation. He's like super tight with Jay-Z and stuff. So I start training all of that circle, all the Rock Nation circle. Emory Jones, all of that. And then he tells me, hey, man, I want you to go train my other guy over here, He's in Hidden Hills. So I go up to this gated community, drive into Hidden Hills, go there. This guy named Corey Gamble, which is with the Kardashians. I train him for a little bit, and my world just opens up, They're the ones that taught me about Venmo, Cash App, Zelle. I had no idea. Jay was like, dude, man, I'll pay you in cash. I didn't even know what to charge, He's like, I'll pay you in cash, but you need to know about these things, it'll make it a lot easier for you. So I start downloading these apps. These guys are like kind of putting me up on game and stuff. And I trained with them for a while. And then I go from there to away from the gym. I break from the gym, and then I just start training clients on my own privately. And that went for a little bit, and then I started to get tired of driving around, and so I look for another gym to bring all of my clients to that are in the Calabasas, Woodland Hills, Thousand Oaks area. And I walk into this gym called Craft, and it had just opened. It was this huge warehouse across the street from the Erewhon in Calabasas, and so I meet with the owner, and the owner was George Foreman III, right? And so we meet, and he's like, man, I love your energy. I would be more than happy to have you here as one of my coaches. And then that was another jump for me, So I start working at Craft, same thing. I build out like the youth program that was there. I start teaching other celebrities, pro athletes, NFL, NBA, all of these different things. And then one day this woman walks in, and George and a couple of the other people are like, hey, I want to introduce you to her. We had a mutual friend, and her name is Stephanie Simbari. And, I really want you to talk to her about podcasting. And at this time, I hadn't gone on any podcasts. I hadn't done any of that. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to like share my story, or if I was just wanting to just put everything behind me and just move forward in this way. But I was open to it, and George and them were always like, you have a powerful story, it'd be great if you shared it. So Stephanie had been like an early pioneer in the podcasting world. She had a really successful one called That's So Retrograde. That was, went for like 6-7 years. And she was a stand-up comedian for many years. And she's a writer and creative. And she is just so fucking rad. Stephanie is, man. So I meet Stephanie, and we hit it off. And so we schedule a work thing, we're going to go meet up. And when we meet up, we don't work, instead we end up, just falling in love with each other. And so about 2.5 weeks later, she's pregnant. And I didn't realize how happy I was going to be when I heard that. All the way up to that time, like if my mom or anybody asked me about it, you gonna have kids, you gonna do this, you gonna do that? I'm like, no way, I just got out the joint. I'm still trying. I don't even know how to fucking text yet. Are you kidding me? Have kids. And so anyways, I meet Steph and she's living down in Malibu, and I'm teaching back and forth between Malibu Fitness down off of like Canaan, and I'm teaching at Craft, and I have my private clients, and I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well for myself. And Steph tells me that she's pregnant. And she then looks at me and she says, I hope you don't think I'm like, we got to get married now type of girl, And for me, it made me feel good, that she said that. It made me feel like I had a choice, And I looked at her and she was in this big bathtub. I crawled into the bathtub with her, and I just felt so happy. And I felt like my life was like, it had only been a year and a half, 2 years, since I had come home. And I had my own place now, in Thousand Oaks. I had an apartment. I had 2 cars, knew how to sign a fucking check. And so I looked at her and I just told her how happy I was. And I told her that I was really happy that it was with her. And that I was going to do my best to be a good dad, And we move in with each other in Malibu. And we get this house off of Big Rock. When we get up to it, man, we look out and you see the Pacific Ocean as far as you can fucking see, dude. And I just was like, here we go crying again, I just could not believe this. And so she goes into pregnancy, and man, I'm there, I'm taking care of her, I'm working, I'm crushing, and art is coming back into my life, writing is coming back into my life. She's inspiring me as an artist. She's opening me up, and teaching me all these new things when it comes to, how big the world can be. Lattes at the Soho House, and fucking, flew to New York, went to Miami, I'm just all these different things. And so we get this house together, and it was important to Steph that our son was going to be born at home. She wanted to have a natural birth. And for me, I felt like this level of connection to that because that's how I was born. I was born at home. And my dad caught me on the way out. And so it was almost like this generational thing. I was like, wow, I'm going to catch my fucking son like my dad did for me. And sure enough, man, it comes time for the birth, and she goes into labor and starts at like 2 a.m. And I'm just there with her and we're getting through it. And like, thank God I had been through all this fucking stuff in my life because I'm not a panicky person, like the idea of her giving birth at home and all of that different stuff was like, it didn't make me feel panicked, I wanted to be responsible and I wanted us to be safe. But I was completely just like in agreement with the idea. And so anyways, man, we have a doula, or we have a midwife, and we have a OB there at the house. And Steph's in labor. And she gives birth to our beautiful, beautiful baby boy. And I catch this dude, and I lift him up, and I look out at the fucking ocean, and I'm just like, I feel this new level of purpose, this new level of meaning in my life. And like all this stuff that I had been searching for, even as an artist, even in remorse, even in how to cope with the guilt, even in like identity crisis of being a Crip, of all these different things, man. It was like, oh, I'm a dad, And it was like the first time that part of me that I knew was like that level of depth that was inside of me. It was the first time that I had a reason now to tap into that. Because like I feel like all those other different roles, I was trying to put that part of myself into something like that, but it ultimately always comes back to like me, in this way. Whereas having a kid, it doesn't come back to me. It always just goes back to him, It always goes back to like, I do this for him. And of course, it's important for me to take care of myself as well, so that way I can be the best version of myself for him, But ultimately, all of my love, all of my purpose, all of my principles is so that way I get to pour it into him, And I want to be that example, So it was like, thank God I had found work ethic and integrity and honesty and, all of those different things, and compassion and kindness and love, and I just get to like pour that onto him. So anyways, I'm diving into the role of a dad, and I'm holding this new little baby, and I'm just like completely in love with him. And I'm on paternity leave for like 3 months. I take the full 3 months, and I'm just at the house immersed in being a parent and being a good partner to Steph. And I start to get back to work. I never go back to the gym. I just start training my clients privately, driving to their houses and stuff. And one day I'm driving back through the canyon to our place in Malibu, and Steph calls me and she says, hey man, crazy thought. How about we sell our cars, buy a van, and we blow off across the country, right? And we go look to see where we want to raise our kids at. And I was like, how are we going to do that? I was getting ready. My work was going to jump into this next, level of it. And, I was all of these different things. I had all these different reasons why. And she says, just think about it, and hangs up the phone. And by the time I had made it through the canyon, I thought to myself, what the fuck am I talking about? When else are you going to get a chance like this? And so I get home and I said, let's do it. So we pack the cars up. We sell our cars. We buy a new Chrysler Pacifica where all the seats lay down. My son is about 6 months old at this time. And we close out our lease and we blow off across the country. And the first place that we landed in after, skipping all the way through was the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, a place called Black Mountain right outside of Asheville. And beautiful place. We stay there for about a month, and then Steph says, hey, man, we should head north. She's from New York, and she's like, let's go up there. Let's go see what's up in New York and go upstate. And so I'm like, okay. So we pack up the car. We drive. 24 hours later was the mass floods in North Carolina. The Airbnb that we had been like, semi was floating down in front of it. We get up to New York. We go from New York to Vermont, from Vermont to Massachusetts, from Massachusetts to Maine, from Maine back down to New York. I'm cold plunging in the North Fork, holding my son as I backpack him through Woodstock. We go all the way down to Miami. We live in Miami for about 2 months. My son we're diving into the ocean, man, and all these different things. And the house that we had on Big Rock burns down during the Malibu fires, So it's like just crazy timing, all of these different things. And we go from Miami to Austin. We're in Austin, Texas for a little bit,
Your house burned down?
Burned down.
In the fires?
That's right. 2 months after we left. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
That's some good luck.
Great luck, man. And so first 2 months,
Similar thing happened to me.
Really?
Yeah, in the Palisades.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, got decimated. And that was like a lot of, that was my whole area. It was like the Palisades, Brentwood, Malibu. So we were watching in Miami, we were watching the fires take place, we were just like, oh my God, man, the amount of people that were it wrecked. The entire Palisades was basically gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go over to Austin, we get into Austin, Texas. We're there for about a month and a half. I go on a podcast over there, which is really good. A lot of people reached out. It helped me also get into another place in my life. I'm transitioning away from just being a private trainer. I'm writing full time. I'm working on, this screenplay, this TV show. I'm reading these books. I'm learning how to write a pilot and a season arc and fucking just this whole thing, put together a deck, like all this different stuff, right? I'm just learning. And And then we were like, you know what, work is taking us back out to California. We had a whole house in storage. So we drive back out to California. We thought we were going to be in Santa Barbara. We get up to Santa Barbara and we look at the house and we decide we don't want to rent that house. So we come back down to Thousand Oaks and we find this place in Old Agora. You know, it's beautiful, 2 acres. And on the back is a big red barn that's like drywalled. And I walk inside of it and I go, man, this would be really nice old school boxing gym. So I just start drilling stuff and I go on Facebook Marketplace. I start finding bags and everything like that. And I turn it into an old school boxing gym. It's operating today. I run all my clients out of there. Everybody comes by. It's amazing. I get to work right from home, you know, be with my kids and stuff. And then Steph and I start diving into the writing really serious. And next thing you know, man, you know, we put together this pilot for a TV show. And this is all based off of my experiences and stuff like that. And gets us a meeting, you know, and they want to finance it. You know, we're looking for talent and for a showrunner now. And I got an amazing writing partner on a screenplay that's going to be coming out about my life. Man, dude, you know, it's just wild. Josh Brolin's played the guitar for my kid. Like, it's been amazing. And so when we get back into California and I start building all this stuff, all of a sudden Steph gets pregnant again, right? Unexpectedly. Same thing, man. Now I have a beautiful, beautiful baby girl, you know, and born at home, caught her on the way out, pulled her right up into me, man, and just smelled her. We all sleep in the same bed like a pride of lions, you know. And I just love my family, man. I just love my life.
Well, your life is just turned around so much.
Yeah, in this wild way.
But looking back at all of this, how do you explain it all?
Beyond me, you know, the universe, God, whatever. You know, I'm not a very religious person, but I definitely believe in powers that are greater. And I think that it's a combination behind opportunities that life throws your way and whether or not you're in a position to be able to recognize it for one, and then whether or not you are the type of person that can then rise to the occasion for it, you know? So I think it's a combination behind hard work. I think it's, and being genuine, right? Like one time a guy asked me, you know, we were on the yard and he goes, he realized, you know, like I would land in a place and then the moment that I land there, I start to try to build. What's the building I want to be in? What's the job that I want to have? What's the celly that I want to have, right? You know, who is who? What's going on? And he asked me one time, he goes, you know, what's the difference between that and manipulation? You know, because you're sitting here, you're scoping things and you're like figuring stuff out. Isn't that what being manipulative? And I said, no, it's not. And I go, the reason why it's not is because the reason why it's not is because if you're being real with who you are, right, that's what negates the fact that it's manipulation. So as an example, if I wanted to work in the law library and I'm stuck in the kitchen and I start going to the law library to let the people get a feel for who I am, build a relationship with the staff, ultimately then get pulled into there. The thing that doesn't make it manipulative for me to be in there and doing all of that is that I'm the person that I say that I am when I show up. If I say that I'm helpful and that I'm honest, and I work hard and all of those different things, right? If that's who you are, then that's the thing that doesn't make it manipulative. Now, if I was lazy, dishonest, and all of that then it becomes manipulative because you're putting yourself forward as something that you're not. It's not whether or not you're recognizing opportunities, you know, that's not the thing that makes it manipulation. I don't know if that makes sense or not, or if I did a good job of explaining it. So I accredit it to one, a higher power, right? And then I accredit it to being genuine and working really hard, you know, on being that person that I say that I am. And principles. So for example, I don't care. I just went back into the juvenile hall recently that I started at, right? At Sylmar Juvenile Hall. And I held the pads for the kids all day. A friend of mine named Scott Budnick is the one that took me in, right? He's the producer of the Hangover films and Project X and all of that. And he started an organization called the ARC, which is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And they do a lot of advocacy work, right? Specifically for juveniles that have been tried as an adult. So anyways, he takes me back into Sylmar, and I'm looking at it now this was only just like a month and a half ago. And I'm looking at everything from these new eyes. And the message that I was telling the kids is when you work hard, when you're dependable, when you're honest, when you're caring, those are the ingredients, right? You can work your way into the door, but you're not going to be able to stay in the room if you're not those things. Eventually what will happen is people will figure out that you're not any of that type of stuff, and then they're going to boot you out of the room, But if you go in there and you believe in those principles, not because of what they do for you, but the intrinsic value of them, the fact that they are valuable in and of themselves, right? That's really the key. It's not about doing it because you're trying to get the reward. It's being that way because you see value in it, regardless of the reward. And then what's funny is that the reward actually happens, And so that's kind of like what I accredit it to, all of it.
Being authentic.
That's right. Yeah, be who you are. Be who you say you are. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned in stepping away from the Crips. That was the biggest lesson that I learned throughout my journey of incarceration was I wanted to be who I was regardless of where I'm at. So I wasn't going to be in prison anymore and say, you know what? I believe in peace, and I believe in communication, and I believe in peaceful resolution. I believe in being honest and all of that. But I'm in prison, and so there's no space for any of that. So I'm going to participate in violence. I'm going to excuse manipulation. I'm going to all these different things. The moment that I said, nah, fuck all that. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to be who I am. That's it, right? No labels. No. And when I am lost and I don't know what to do and I'm confused, I'm going to hold on to the principles and just hope that those are going to guide me through, So when you hold on to something like, fuck, I don't know what to do, but you know what? I'm going to be caring. That's the shit that gets you through all of the different things, and even to this day, because my life is still unfolding. And there's a lot of things that I know, I could feel it. I could feel big things are still continuing to move, and I'm pushing them forward, right? TV show, movie, all this different stuff is going to be happening. And when it does, I want to have something to be grounded, right, as the world is opening up even more. Because wealth and everything that's in between, it's easy to get lost out here. So, that's what I accredit it to.
Incredible story.
Thank you, man.
All right, man. Tyler Corcoran, thank you so much for sharing it.
Holy shit, dude. Oh my gosh. I can't believe I talked for